Welcome to the Bucks County Community College Baking and Pastry Arts Podcast. I am Chef John Angeline. The information I'm going to go over in this podcast will be basic information about some of the ingredients and equipment that you'll find in the bake shop. We'll be working with these ingredients and equipment throughout the semester. Using the right flour in baked goods is important to obtain the right texture and quality in the finished product. When making cakes, use what is known as cake flour. Cake flour contains less gluten than all-purpose flour. Cake flour gives your cakes a more tender texture, a more delicate crumb, and overall consistency. High gluten or bread flour is what we will use when making yeast products. This type of flour will help to provide the chewy texture that is associated with yeast products. All-purpose flour will be used occasionally for products in which it is appropriate. The sugars we will use are granulated, 10X, confectioner's or powdered sugar, 3 names for the same thing, and brown sugar. If a formula just lists sugar, use granulated. Fats. The type of fat we will primarily use will be butter. The type of butter we will use is known as sweet or unsalted butter. We use this type because you can then control the amount of salt that is added in a formula. Shortening is another fat we will use, but butter will give your baked goods a much better flavor. 2 forms of eggs will be used, shell and liquid. Shell eggs will be sized large, which is a 2-ounce egg. The weight of a 2-ounce egg is broken down to be about 1 ounce of egg white, 0.67 of an ounce yolk, and the remainder shell. Liquid eggs are just normal eggs that have the yolks and whites mixed together and then are pasteurized. Pasteurizing liquid eggs makes them salmonella-free. Measure liquid eggs by volume. 1 pound, or 16 ounces, equals 1 pint. Salt is a very important ingredient in baking. It plays 3 roles. As a seasoning or flavor enhancer, something made without salt will taste flat. In bread making, salt strengthens gluten structure, so it improves the texture of the finished product. Also in bread making, salt slows down or inhibits yeast growth. It controls yeast fermentation. The leavening agents we will use in the kitchen lab are yeast, baking powder, and baking soda. Yeast is the leavening in bread, sticky buns, Danish, and other products. There are 3 types of commercial yeast: active dry, instant, and fresh, cake, or compressed. We will be using active dry in the products we make. Information about the characteristics of each type of yeast is provided in the Yeast Products podcast. Baking powder and baking soda are chemical leavening agents and are used in some cookies, cakes, quick breads, and other baked goods. Information about baking powder and baking soda is included in the Quick Breads podcast. In most circumstances, all ingredients should be at room temperature. Butter will cream quicker and to greater volume. Butter should be at cool room temperature, about 70 degrees, and not runny or soft. Eggs will whip to greater volume and will also mix in smoother to other ingredients if they are at room temperature. Many of the ingredients we will use in the kitchen lab will be measured by weight or by volume. Ingredients we measure by weight are all flours, all sugars, including corn syrup and honey, fats, such as butter or shortening, and chocolate. After you weigh your dry ingredients, they need to be sifted before using them in a recipe. always sift flour, 10x sugar, cocoa, and cornstarch. The reasons being, it removes lumps, it aerates, it removes unwanted objects, and dry ingredients will blend better with other ingredients if they are sifted first. Ingredients measured by volume are eggs, dairy products such as milk or heavy cream, and water. The liquid ingredients, water, milk, and eggs, should be measured by volume. You use a measuring cup to measure volume. A measuring cup measures volume in liquid ounces, not weight. 1 ounce of liquid volume is not the same as 1 ounce of weight. For certain liquids, though, water, milk, and eggs, and also for melted butter, 1 ounce of volume does equal 1 ounce of weight. For dry ingredients, such as flour and sugar, and for many liquids, such as corn syrup, oil, or honey, an ounce in a measuring cup will not equal an ounce on a scale. When we measure the liquid ingredients, water, milk, and eggs, we will use a measuring cup because all of those ingredients conveniently weigh 1 pound per pint. The measuring cups we are going to use in the kitchen are 1 cup measure, or 8 ounces, 2 cup measure, or 1 pint, or 16 ounces, a 1 quart measure, which is 4 cups, or 32 ounces, and a 1 gallon measure, which is 4 quarts, 16 cups, or 128 ounces. If a recipe calls for 1 pound of eggs, you would measure 1 pint or 16 ounces. Vanilla can also be measured by volume. 1 tablespoon equals a ½ ounce. You use measuring spoons for small amounts of dry ingredients, such as salt or spices. 1 tablespoon equals 3 teaspoons. When we're making cakes, we need to grease the cake pans. We'll use a solid white shortening such as Crisco. Pan sprays contain water and are expensive. Butter also contains added water and is expensive. Pan sprays have the benefit of being quick to use, but a solid white shortening will work the best for greasing cake pans. For the cakes in this class, we won't need to line the pans with parchment. We're only making small cakes. All we need to do is grease and flour the cake pans. One thing you won't see listed in the formulas in our textbook is an amount of baking time, such as this cake takes 20 minutes to bake. I use a simple way to tell if a cake or other pastry is finished. I bake till done. Speaking of finished, this podcast is done, but there are other baking podcasts in this series. I'm Chef John Angeline. I'll see you in the bake shop. Thanks for listening to the Bucks County Community College Baking and Pastry Arts Podcast.